To order at 6 p.m. Councilors present on the committee is Councilor Tavares and Councilor Reynolds. All right, we have some guest speakers, and we are going to have a lot of questions, so we'll try to do our best. But looks like you're on deck, Lynn, and if you want to give us your thoughts, and then we'll we got a lot of questions. So.
I saw.
Yeah.
Good evening. How is everyone? So I thought it'd be worthwhile to kind of go through kind of how we got here, because I think it's important. So we're looking at the classification and compensation plan, and I'm entitling it building a strong foundation for the future of Attleboro, because I do think it's important. So I think, as everyone knows, then Councilor DeSimone and Councilor Delicio had made a motion that they wanted to have a study done. And so that got done, I believe, in September of '22. I think at that time they were saying, hey, are our salaries competitive, right? That's what we were kind of looking at that point. The council voted for the funding in February of '23. Of course, at that time, there was a lot of turnover, so it took a little while to get things going. So in the fall, I started in May of '23, so in the fall of '23 is when we kind of kicked things off, to actually get this process started with the RFP, get a company on board, things of that nature. So I think that we kind of use interchangeably salary survey versus classification and compensation study. And I'd like to kind of make some differences because I think it's important. A salary survey really implies that we're looking at just the salary. And maybe when this got sent down, maybe that was kind of the thought. But what we really needed was much more than that for a lot of reasons. And I hopefully as we go through the presentation, we can, kind of discuss it as well. So this study really was about the entire structure of the plan. Currently, the plan has grades 0.5 to 15. 0.5, one of the positions is a nutrition aide at the COA. Grade 15 is the mayor. Now, throughout this process, we realized that electeds really weren't supposed to be on the plan, but they were, so they were included as part of this because that's where they were. So, again, we were looking at the positions. Right, that's what this really looked at, not about just the salary, not about the people in it, not about longevity or anything like that. It was really about the positions that were on the plan, and that's really what we did for this new study. The last time a salary survey was done, and it was a salary survey, was in 2006. And that was really the whole city. I shouldn't say the whole city, not public safety, but the labor market, the clerical, and it was about 125 positions that were evaluated. But again, that was really the salaries. There wasn't any talk about classification at that point in time. The communities that were used in 2006 were Barnstable, Brockton, Falmouth, Franklin, Gloucester, Mansfield, Needham, North Attleboro, Norwood, Plymouth, and Wareham. So different than the ones that you saw in this study. In that, I couldn't find anything that gave any rhyme or reason to why those communities were used. But sometimes it's who responds, right? Like that's part of it, right? We send these salary surveys that we hope communities respond, but they don't always. So that was kind of the structure of the last one. Positions have changed, added, taken out. We haven't had in this current classification and compensation plan a way to evaluate how we're putting them in. Some of it's a little guesswork, and I've done it too, right, since I've been here. We added education curator, we added zoo curator. Both of those positions were in the union. Same with plans examiner and local inspector. So we kind of just put them in where we thought they fit with the salary, but not necessarily looking at the group of jobs or other positions that were in that group. It was really based on salary. So we didn't have a kind of an objective way to evaluate the positions to put them on the plan. The other thing I'd just like to note, because I'm going to use some different terms, I want to kind of change it. Same as I'm saying about salary survey, I want to use the classification and compensation study. The term exempt. Right now, it's very easy to say the exempt plan, and that's what we say at City Hall, right? It's the exempt plan. Exempt is actually a legal term under the Fair Labor Standards Act, so we're going to change that when we're talking about this plan to non-represented employees. not affiliated with the union, kind of independent employees, if you will. So I want to kind of make that distinction because I'm going to go back to that a little bit later when we talk about the FLSA, because it is something that we hadn't addressed in the past. Why do we do it? What's the importance of it? So pay equity is a big one. We want to make sure that jobs with similar responsibility, qualifications, and working conditions are grouped together. When you do that, you don't run into any issues with discrimination, right? It's similar jobs, similar pay, no matter who's doing them, and that's really what we would do. We want to review the minimum qualifications, which is what we did to some extent during this, because the positions aren't graded on the people that are in them. They're graded on what are the minimum qualifications, education, experience. Those are usually the two biggest, but we're going to go through what we did to get there. But that's what we need to kind of remember. I know we have some seasoned employees, but if we were to rehire them, whether they have a master's degree and it only requires a bachelor's degree, like those are some differences. So that's why we're looking at the positions, not really at the people in them. I know we're going to get to a little bit later about the people in them and how that kind of plays out, but for purposes of this, we're really looking at the positions. Competitive recruitment and retention and competitive pay, obviously, we're always looking at that to make sure we're getting in good people and they're going to come here and they're going to stay. Consistency when in adding or changing positions, we just talked about that a little. You want to make sure that when we're adding positions, we're adding them to the right grouping. We want to build a solid foundation, right? That, to me, is really what this is about, is building that solid foundation to have a classification plan that gives us that. We know it's good. That's never to say, and I will never say that it's going to be set in stone, right? There's always going to be some movement. There's always going to be change. We don't want to go back to a time when we're back, now it's 20 years later, right? I mean, it's not quite 20, but just about, right, that we're doing another one. That isn't what we should be doing. But we need to build a solid foundation first before we put the rest of the blocks on top of it. The other thing is, too, there's two things that we're really looking at the classification and compensation plan: internal equity and external equity. So internal, again, like I talked about, that the internal positions are grouped correctly with each other. So in our current plan, we do have an example. The assistant superintendent at DPW is graded higher than the assistant superintendent at water and wastewater. I don't know how it ended up there, but that is what it is on our current plan. So we do have some of those inequities right now on our current plan. The challenges in doing study. So we undertook to do 79 varying positions, and that's a lot. So again, we're ranging from the 0.5 to the 15, the 14 of the both the public safety chiefs. So there's a wide variety of positions there. How do you do that in one study, right? Because we're not doing individual studies for each and every position. So part of that is the grouping of the positions together to understand how it fits. So we went and we did 13 comparable communities. If you looked at the study, you'll see the methodology used by GovHR as to how they chose their communities. Again, like I mentioned earlier, the other one didn't really give us too many indication as how they chose their communities. I will say, I know opinions vary on the study and how to do it. And of course, there are a million ways to do it. Everyone's got, their own opinion. And I think Mason and I saw that when we met with a lot of the department heads. And that's okay. We all have our opinions and we all think of better ways, but we have to understand too, no two communities are alike. Not everyone has wastewater as their city department. A lot of it's privatized. Not everyone has an elections office, So there are varying among communities. You're not going to get, Attleboro can't compare exactly to Taunton, can't compare exactly to Fall River. Some of them run an ambulance, some of them don't. So there are varies, and we have to take that into consideration because it's never going to be apples to apples. So I like how GovHR gave us a methodology. Agree or disagree, it was a methodology to choose the communities that did get us here. That is not to say that we can't look at some other communities if it fits. But doing a study taking on 79 positions, you can't do that all at the same time. We can't say, okay, for fire, we're going to look at this community, police will look at this community. We can't do that. It's just hard to do it all in one all at one time. So this was an effort to try to get all of these positions onto the class plan, and then from there, right? This is a start. What else are we gonna go from there? So, again, the plan has to work for the city, right? That's the main thing. It's not gonna be a one-size-fits-all, but I do think it's a one-size-fits-most. And I think we can kind of get to some other places if we need to. But again, I really do think we have to start somewhere. We hired a consultant who gave us a lot of good guidance, but that's what they do. They don't come up with just a plan and drop it and say, this is what you should do. It's really giving us data, helping us interpret the data, and helping us put it together in a way that makes sense for Attleboro. Because that's, again, all the plans are personal. So you talk to other HR people, everyone's doing something different because that's the nature of it. So there's no consistency, and it just has to work for your community, and I think that's important to note. I'm going to kind of give you a high level of the process. What did we go through to kind of get here? So we hired GovHR. Most through my office, we had the communication. They wanted the current class plan, job descriptions, kind of what's been done in the past, when were other studies done, what are your challenges? So one of our challenges was hiring people in, right? It's a challenge everywhere, but we were having some struggles. So that was something that they were going to help us with. So they gave what they called job analysis questionnaires. So we're going to go through that criteria in a little bit to help you understand, but it was a document that was given to department heads to be filled out by these 79 positions. So everyone if you were in the position, you completed it. And then they were provided to GovHR, and interviews were scheduled. And I don't want to say everyone, a good majority of people did have their interviews with GovHR. Not everyone found them helpful. GovHR is in this business, so some of the positions that might seem kind of obvious, I feel like weren't maybe as in depth. They asked them some questions. But I think for the most part, the overall feedback I got with that, most people felt that it was worth it, at least to have the conversation. Following that, GovHR provided us with some raw data. And then after that, we worked with GovHR to translate kind of what that meant, because as Mason will tell you, spreadsheets aren't necessarily my thing. I'm in HR because I'm a words person, so I don't necessarily do spreadsheets. This was a lot of numbers and a lot of spreadsheets to kind of figure out. So it was a lot to work through to understand kind of where we were going to go and how we were going to go there. So in the JAQ, they had very specific criteria that they used. And so ahead of time, employees weren't really given like the context of what it was going to mean. We didn't know. We just filled it out, and kind of went through, and then we went back through. So one of the criteria is preparation and training, experience required, decision-making and independent judgment, responsibility for policy development, planning of work, contact with others, work of others, working conditions, and use of technology. So when we talk about education level, like I alluded to earlier, it's not about the person in the position's education level. It's what is the education level required as a minimum requirement to get into the position. So the person may have a master's degree. It's only required for a bachelor's degree. The points were given for a bachelor's degree. That's how it was scored. Minimum experience. The person may have been in the position 20 years, but you only need 3 to get in. It was rated based on 3. That was what was in the job description. So the next one was level of discretion and potential impact of erroneous decisions. So this one's a little bit trickier, and it took a little bit more, I think, on a lot of the employees and the department heads' part. But how they there was several categories they could choose, but it could be, is it a little discretion and minor impact, Or is it a high, very high discretion and a critical impact? So if someone made an error, what would be the impact of that error on the city or on their department, depending on what it is? But that was kind of how that was graded. So, what kind of discretion level did they have? Development of policy, both within and between departments. Does the employee plan work for others? There are some departments that are small, so they operate independently. They might not supervise people. That's also taken into account. Contact with coworkers or members of the public. There are some positions that are very public-facing, right? But there are some positions that are very internal. So their contact with the public isn't as much. So there was a grading system for that, depending on the type of contact that they had there. Again, levels of work and work contact, that's a supervisor. Are they supervising other people? Are they looking at their work? Are they giving out work? Not just the planning of work, but also the supervision of it. Office work versus external work. So you have some of the, health agents or inspectors. They're going out in the field, right? They're exposed to many other things, as opposed to some of us that are in our office most of the time. So there were different grading points for that as well. And then, of course, technology. Everyone uses technology, but there are varying levels. Like if you're in MIS, obviously you're doing a whole lot more than just using the computer. Some of the water, wastewater, DPW might have some other specialized equipment that they're using that they need to. So that was kind of what went into the technology factor. So kind of, to highlight, one of the positions that we have is we have 2 lab managers, one in water and one in wastewater. The lab manager in water supervises people. The lab manager in wastewater supervises people. The lab manager in water does not. So prior, they were on the same grade, and in our current plan, they're on the same grade. But in our, in the proposed plan, they're on different grades because someone does supervise people, and that those points are taken into account. So there's a different aspect of the job when you're supervising. It's not just about your work, it's about you directing others' work and supervising that work, and that's another level. So the additional points that was added on for that did put them at 2 different grades, because at that point, they're kind of 2 different jobs. Yes, they both work in labs, but they're not the exact same anymore, because one works completely independently and on his own, and the other one works also supervise their own work plus the supervision of others. So just to kind of highlight that bit of difference. So the results, and you've already seen it because you've seen the plan. How it kind of played out, we got to the numbers, right? And then we went through the numbers with GovHR. Does this make sense? Do these numbers make sense? So there were some that didn't make sense, and some of it was because the employee that filled out the JAQ filled it out as if it was just about them, right? So they put down that they had a master's degree, so they got points for that. They put down, that they have 10 years experience. But some of it we had to go back and say, okay, that's how you're doing the job, but that's not the position. So through GovHR, they helped us flag some positions that seemed like they were a little bit out of whack from the other ones that they were grouped in. And so that took some time to go through and figure out what makes sense, right, based on that. And some of it's based on their knowledge of other communities, of what makes sense. But we also have to put it in context here. Do we do it differently here, right? There are some positions that maybe in another community they don't do it the same way. So you have to take that into account. So taking all that into account, and I'm making it sound simple, it really wasn't. I'm kind of simplifying it for your purposes, but there was a lot to review, and it did take a long time to go through and kind of digest what it is. So we came up, or GovHR helped us come up with several different categories. Administration and technical staff, and there's 3 different subcategories in there. Supervisors and advanced technical staff, and there's 4 categories in there. Directors and senior managers, and there's 4 categories in there, and public safety. Excuse me. So I talked a little bit earlier about the FLSA, Fair Labor Standards Act. And this is where the exempt's gonna come in. So if you are truly an exempt employee based on your duties, you don't get paid overtime. And this is, I know I'm simplifying really the FLSA, but at the heart of it, this is what it comes down to. So we need to decide, even though, like I said earlier, we were calling this the exempt plan, right? And saying that no one's due overtime. There was a couple exceptions, but for the most part in our current plan, most people weren't saying they were entitled to overtime, or the thought process wasn't that they were entitled to overtime. But when you look at the FLSA, it's really based on the type of job that they have. So the people that are in the administration and technical staff group are called FLSA non-exempt. That means if they work more than 35, or in some cases 40 for the animal control officers, they are entitled to overtime. Now, the FLSA says overtime, time and a half, kicks in at 40 hours. So between 35 and 40, they'd still be paid for their work at their straight time, but 40 is when the time and a half kicks in. But they are entitled to that additional pay for work. However, someone like myself, if I come in at 7 and I leave at 7, I get paid for my 35 hours a week. I'm not entitled to overtime based on my job duties. And we didn't really have that distinction last time, and those positions are generally grouped together because there are certain categories. So the administration and technical staff is really where that lives, and that's the only group. Other than that, the rest of the staff are considered FLSA exempt in this non-represented group. I do think that based on everything, that this does give us a strong foundation. I think this, giving these groups, breaking up the exempt, non-exempt, explaining it, understanding it, really does give us a good, strong foundation going forward. I do think that's important because I don't think you can look at the other aspect of it. If you want to change salaries on our current system, I don't know if they're grouped correctly to change the salary as a whole, and that's my concern, right? So we can say, oh, well, we're going to, we think this band should be raised up. But I don't know that everyone in that band should be in that band and should be raised up, right? So I do think we need to look at the classification and get that foundation before we look at anything else. And it is, I know it's a big change. I know there's been a lot of talk about it, but I do think it's needed because I'm not sure how long this plan has been in place. I mean, we know since at least 2006, but I don't know how it got into place. And, and however it did, it doesn't really matter. Does it work for us now? Does it work for the city now? I think that's the question. And to me, the answer is no, we need to make some changes. And it's not just about the money piece, that's obviously part of it, but it is about the structure and the foundation. So another one of the results, which I think people are well aware of, there were 21 positions that were sought to be undercompensated. And they need to be brought up to the proper pay range. Part of it, as you know, the current plan has steps, right? So you get a step, it's a certain number. We don't always bring everyone in at step 1, but if you bring them in at another step, you're bringing them in at whatever this number is. So if someone says, I want, I'd like to counter with $85,000, right? I have to say, well, I have, usually it's with Mason, I can do 83, I can do 86, what are we gonna do? Because we're stuck with these steps. I don't have any way to say, yes, we can do 85. Maybe we can, but I don't have a step to place it on. I don't have any place to put it. It has to fit within the current structure that we have, which is the incremental steps from 1 to 11. And they're 3% in between. On an annual basis, people get a step. And that's problematic. In how things have been done, and please don't take this as being critical. This is just an overview of right now and where I think we need to go. But right now, the majority of the performance evaluations that are done are not necessarily meaningful. And I think we haven't had the training for the department heads to make them meaningful. So a lot of times we're checking boxes, we're sending the paper to my office to say, yep, okay, give them their step increase. We're not having any meaningful conversations about what are your expectations for next year? What'd you do this year? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What training do you want? What else do you want to do? We're not doing that. So very much right now, the steps have become, you're here another year, here's your step. That's kind of where we're at right now. And again, it's not a criticism. I think that a lot of the department heads haven't really had the training to be able to have those meaningful conversations. But I think we need to take a step back and look at that. I'm not going to speak as much to the money. I'll leave that to Mason, but I know the 3% is problematic budget-wise, and whether it's financially sustainable. You know, I want to also at this time say, difference between steps and COLAs, cost of living increases. So the steps are part of the plan that someone would get on an annual basis for reaching an anniversary. COLA, cost of living adjustment, is done usually at the beginning of a fiscal year, and it's based on funding. There are no changes to the COLA whatsoever. That's still going to be based on budget and whether it can be done. So that's what's done now, right? We look at to see, or I shouldn't say we because it's Mason or budget people will look to see, can we do a COLA? What can it be? What's the cost? So that is not changing whatsoever in this new structure. That will remain the same. The questions will remain the same. It will remain financial. I think the steps, they're still going to be 2% steps, but they're not going to be, it's going to be a range. So the step won't be, $10,115, right? It'll be 2%. And whatever that number is, but we won't have the steps having specific numbers along the way. So as we're hiring people in, and when I go to Mason and beg for money for, to get people in, if they say 85, I can put them at 85 because that's in the range, and we don't have a specific step that we're trying to meet. So those are some of the challenges that we've had that we want to try to change up as we go forward. And one of the other things is the part-time employees. At some point in time, part-time employees, and I refer to part-time as 19 hours or less for the most part, and this does not include seasonal. So obviously we have a bunch of seasonal employees like lifeguards. Those are the easiest ones that come to mind. They work for a short period of time, 40 hours, but we're not talking about those people. We do have some, mostly at library and COA, that are part-time employees, 19 hours a week or less. We don't have a lot of them, but they've somehow got onto this plan. They've got steps, and some of them are earning quite a bit of money, more than some of our entry-level people. And they don't really get evaluated to see, because part-time isn't necessarily we need it forever. I think we need to evaluate, where do these part-time people fit? Do we need a part-time person? Do we need a full-time person? What's going on in that department? And that's a lot of discussion that Mason and I have had about those positions. They're supposed to be supplementing or assisting as we go along. Have they changed? We haven't really looked at them. They've just kind of bumped along on the plan as we go. They get their, COLA and their step every year, and here we are, kind of reevaluating. So I do think we need to kind of take a look at those as well. It was recommended a performance-based bonus opportunity, which be a one-time payment, not added to the base, of up to 2% of an annual salary, and an employee would be eligible annually. So we thought that was a good way to build in some additional compensation. Some people are stepped out, some people will remain stepped out, but it was a good way to build in some additional opportunity for people. This plays into the performance evaluations. If adopted, obviously we're going to completely revamp how performance evaluations are done. And the plan, my plan anyway, for that, if we do that, we're going to have to do it anyway, but part of the plan would be, okay, I want a working group with department heads, what works and what doesn't. Some people like more checkboxes, some people like more words. What can we do that will get us to where we need to be? And part of that, if we go through the implementation, because I really think it's the first step, is expectation setting. Department heads, you need to sit down with your employees. What are we doing over the course of the next year? What do you want to do? What trainings? Things of that nature. Those conversations we do need to have. We should be having them anyway, but we need to go forward and kind of have those conversations. It'll make the performance evaluation meaningful. If you are in the private sector, performance evaluations are kind of, people don't get nervous about them because they know kind of what's coming. In municipal world, that's not it. It's a fear of, I'm just going to be told everything I'm doing bad. That's all it is. It's a one-way conversation. My department head's going to tell me that I'm not good at my job, and that is what people think. And it shouldn't be. It should be a conversation. It should be a back and forth, because it's not just about what the department head wants. It's about what the employee wants too. It should be. And how can we grow together? Because what I found when I sat in on a lot of these at another municipality I was at is that the employees wanted to do things, but they were afraid to ask. And so that gave them that one time to sit down with their boss. Now, I'm not saying that it should be once a year because it should be ongoing, but at least that one time a year, sit down with your employee and have that one-on-one conversation. Maybe their interests have changed, maybe they haven't, but you don't know until you have that conversation. So I do think that, and that will also be with the performance-based bonus. What did you do to go above and beyond? What other things have you taken on? I think having that will inspire some people to do a little more. A lot of times government work is we come in, we sit, and we leave. We warmed a seat for however long. It doesn't need to be that way. There's a lot of great stuff going on. There's a lot of interesting stuff. And some people want to come in and do their job and go home, and there is nothing wrong with that. If you are doing your job, we're all good. But can we inspire people for this performance-based opportunity to say, hey, there's a lot more that can be done here. Help us do it. I think some people will, some people won't, and it's all okay. But I do think it's a good idea to give them the opportunity. So this gets a little bit more trickier. So 79 positions are in the proposed class plan. But we have 76 people filling them right now. So we have, a couple positions that have more than one people in the same title, and we have some that are empty. So there's about 76 that we have. So based on this plan, and Mason, jump in if I get it wrong here, 56 of the 79 positions would move to a higher minimum salary. 60 positions will move to a higher maximum salary. In the current classification plan, we have 9 40-hour positions. The new class plan would have 2, which would be the animal control officers. The average change in minimum salary range is 4.6%, which is approximately $3,200 per position. And the average change in maximum salary is 5.2%, which is approximately $5,000 per position. Now, for the 40-hour positions, how'd they get on our class plan? It seems to me that they said, well, we need to make more money, we'll give them more hours. So the majority of people work 35 hours at City Hall. So we have these few people that work 40, and that's kind of how they got there. How can we reunify everyone to be kind of on the same page? I can't unify the animal control officers. They're a 7-day-a-week operation. There's 3, I think, two and 1 senior. And that's a lot of ground to cover. So when looking at this plan, we really said, you know what, we really can't reduce those hours. They're not City Hall employees. They're going out, they need the coverage. And that, I think at some point, probably some of you know more than I do, that it was argued for that third position, for that coverage position for when people went out. Because I think for a while, there's only 2 animal control officers. So we will leave those as is because of that coverage needed. So they will remain at the 40 hours. And any hours they work above 40, they'll be entitled to overtime because they're already at their max at 40. So implementation. So obviously it's based on your adoption, if at all, but how we had thought of it is January 5th, which is the first full pay period in the new year. And it would be a roll-in. So there would be a group of people, 21 employees, that are below the minimum that would be brought up to the minimum on January 5th. There are 13 employees within the new range of the current top step that would get a 2% increase in 2025. 35 employees that would roll into the plan. What that means is, like someone like myself, I came in May, so that's my next step date. So nothing for the new plan would happen until May. I would get my next step increase, and then from that point forward, I would be on the new plan going forward from that point. Then that would be my anniversary date for the new plan. So that's how we kind of envision those 35 employees rolling throughout the year into the plan. There are 7 employees that are at or above the maximum range and will be placed in their current salary on January 5th. So they're already at the max, and that's where they'll be slotted coming in. And then other than the 2 animal control officers, we would reduce the current 40-hour people to 35 hours. And then everyone would be consistent except for the animal control officers. So when we talk about some of them that are above the range, 4 of the people that are above the range are 40-hour people. So the ranges that are built on 35 hours. So obviously organically, the 40-hour people are going to be above the range because they have 5 more hours in their salary. So 4 of those are the 40-hour people. 5 out of the 7 at the top step in the current will be at the top step in the new plan. And 2 of the people won't be until the next increase. So when they roll through and they get their increase, then they would be at the top, but they won't be at the top until then. The last piece I have, and I'm not going to speak much about because I'm not sure that it's in my wheelhouse. I mean, I deal with the employees mostly, but it was elected officials. And we did make some suggestions based on that, and I'm going to say that it is a suggestion because I don't think really it's in my purview, but because they were on the current plan, or they are on the current plan, they were surveyed, so we kind of gave some context to that and suggestions as what could happen going forward. But again, they are very much suggestions. Again, I'm the HR director of the employees, not the elected officials, so I don't know that it's completely in my realm, but we felt like since we were going down that road, we'd throw it out there. And that's really the only reason that it's in there. I don't want to overstep and say that we have anything other than, hey, we didn't know at the time that they shouldn't have been technically included in the plan, but they were, here we are, and we just made those recommendations. So take that for what you will. I'm not going to speak too much of that. It was, like I said, it was just some suggestions if you wanted to entertain it. I mean, obviously everything's up to you all, but I don't want to go too deep into that because, like I said, I just think it's out of my purview. I know you have questions.
And would you be able to email this to Virginia at the council, and that can get distributed to everybody? All right, I appreciate it. So we do have a lot of questions, and I would say Mason, Lynn, and Deb, if you want to step in for any, and especially Deb, if you want to clarify or a better understanding, feel free to jump in.
Are you going to do the questions? I think the presentation answered a lot of the questions. Do you want to hit the highlights of some of those and just follow up, or go through the list?
Well, I'll go through the list and
Okay.
then maybe we could say it's just been answered or something. All right. So basically, these questions, came from different counselors that had been that we've all talked to, varying different people and everything. All right. Okay. All right. So the COLAs and the annual increases are obviously 2 different things. While this matter has been addressed, it's important that there is an understanding that there is a difference. All right, so that's kind of sense. Individuals will be paid within the prescribed salary range. This approach provides the administration the ability to negotiate within the range of new hires. Question, is there any opportunity to negotiate with existing employees?
What do you mean by that?
No, I don't think that was my question, but maybe it was. Maybe it could be someone is at the, and maybe Mayor DeSimone kind of touched on this subject last night. Someone is at the top salary range, and you're concerned about retaining them. How would that get handled?
So I don't know. I think it would depend on the person and the position, right? So the salary, the classification compensation plan, I think we found that people are fairly compensated, right? The people that aren't, we know who they are, we would bring them up. So it wasn't intended to address any one particular instance, but I think there's always opportunities to discuss. I think one thing I do want to drive home, because I think it's important, is this is a living document. This isn't something that we're going to put on the shelf and go away. It's written in stone. You can't make changes. And that's not, I know I don't know everyone so well, but I think, I hope people know I'm always willing to do something, right? We can figure it out, we can make it work. Hence the reason those 4 positions got pulled from the union and put into this compensation plan. We're always willing to talk about it and evaluate it. And I think, a lot of it, when I sat down with people to go over some of the JAQs of their positions, people were like, oh, all right, I see what you're getting at. But maybe that job doesn't serve us anymore. right? Maybe it needs to be something else. What should it be? Along with the department head, we can figure that out. Or not, and we say, look, there's not much else we can do. That's, that's the position. Keep in mind, there's a little bit, like, for a department head, if you have an assistant, right? The assistant can't be on the same grade, so we kind of made the decision that they'd be a couple grades below, especially if that person's gonna move up into the, director role at some point. You want them to have somewhere to go and make it feel like a promotion. Yeah. So I don't think any of the conversations are ever closed off. I think we can certainly have them, but what we don't want to do is change the range for one person.
Yeah.
The range, the positions that are grouped together, in my opinion, are good and solid. Again, not that there aren't some that probably need to be looked at, but I do think they're solid, and I think that, we could evaluate them, and I'm always willing to do that.
All right, that's acceptable, I appreciate it. So steps went from 3% to 2%. Some folks have raised concern about losing employees. Does the administration feel that if there is a concern or not a concern on this, let's see, should the administration, can we ask the administration to speak to the overall economic impact of the reduction in the steps?
I'm going to pass the financial portion, but I will say, when you're asking about people leaving, I don't think that the reduction in steps is going to have that. I really and truly don't. Look, a lot of people come to government work for different reasons. Benefits is a large part of it. So while we're talking about strictly salary tonight, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that that's not our overall compensation package, right? We have 14 paid holidays, sick, vacation, retirement, excellent health benefits, right? The city pays 75% of our premiums and 50% of our dental. So we're not talking about that tonight because that's, on the other side, but that is part of our compensation package too. So I don't think changing the step is going to cause people to leave because there's so many other benefits here, but I will defer to Mason on the 3%, 2%.
Good evening. So thank you for allowing me to be here as well. So in the overall economic impact, I think the council knows better than anyone that we live in a 2.5% environment, and we have steps that are greater than that right now, and those are sort of baked in. I think just that alone kind of gives you an idea that it's relatively unsustainable. But some of the challenges I think we face too is that every single year we get to sort of the budget time and the discussion around cost of living adjustments for exempts, and we deal with the struggle between matching the cost of living that the unions are getting in their contracts, which are negotiated, and also being able to meet the 3% step obligations that a significant majority of the employees have. So we have certain exempts that are fully stepped out. They moved through that range relatively quickly because of those 3% steps, and then they sort of cap out. And so you're dealing with sort of an inability to, you're trying to meet the needs of giving, adjusting for cost of living for those top-down employees, but also battling the fact that you have sort of 3% increases for some, but not all employees. And the marginal impact of that is that, some employees are getting, if there's a 2% COLA, some are getting a 2% pay increase, some are getting a 5%. And there's sort of a natural imbalance there on a year-to-year basis, which, again, this plan doesn't necessarily solve that entirely, in that at some point you will cap out on the range, but it does create an opportunity for a one-time additional incentive, right? Those annual performance bonuses. But additionally, if steps are 2%, more consistent across the board, we also have a better opportunity to really meet those COLA expectations and actually ensure that we're kind of in line with the other bargaining groups.
President Osio.
So Mason, thank you for that, and Lynn, thank you for this presentation. I think it's a lot, and you've all done an awesome amount of work, so I appreciate that. I guess if I can be allowed to play devil's advocate for a second, we're still dealing with inflation. We're still dealing with health insurance costs that rise, and yep, the benefits are great, don't want to go there. So how do we respond when people are saying, hey, the cost of living's going up, inflation's still 6, 7, 8, 9%, we have health insurance going up every year? To me, that's something that I'm struggling with on this piece specifically.
Yeah, so again, cost of living is the methodology to deal with those cost of living increases, right? So the reality is we do that calculus every year, but it's also a matter of budgetary constraints. And the other piece I'll say is, yes, there's years where cost of living may be significantly higher, right? I think we had a year, I think 2 years ago it was like 8.7%, right? Which is an unusual year. I think the historic average is closer to 1.7. So if on average we're giving 2% COLAs over the course of time, we're meeting those cost of living adjustments, but there are going to be years where it's just we're unable to kind of deal with those increases on the budget on a year-to-year basis. And that's part of the challenge, right? Our bargaining groups, they do have typically a 3-year term on their contracts. They get to negotiate their COLAs up front. I feel very strongly that we should be trying to match our exempt cost of living adjustments especially to like our clerical cost of living adjustments. I think that's a reasonable approach. And there's been years where I think that the exempts have gotten left behind. And part of the challenge of that is we have a significant number of employees getting 3% steps every year and some employees that are topped out, and you're sort of battling between those two. So I think it's a fair question. It might not answer it directly, but cost of living is really the mechanism to address those issues.
Well, that's what I wanted to hear. So I kind of already knew the answer to that, but it's a question that I've received from department heads. It's questions that I've received from other people I've worked with. That's the challenge. That's the balance is, the cost of living, we don't just get to pull it off of a tree somewhere. It's got to come from somewhere. And for every expenditure here, there's something that it might not be able to go to address. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor Holmes?
Thank you. So I have two questions. One of them has to do with the performance bonus. So with that, I know it was stated it could be up to 2%. Would it be potentially less, or it would be that?
No, it could be up to 2%, so I think we're still working through that that would be part of the working group,
Okay.
right? What does that look like? But we're saying up to 2% of a person's salary. So yes, it could be 0.5, it could be 1, it could be, we're still working through what that looks like, but it's not just if you get it, it's 2%.
Okay, sorry, so it would be tied to the review, though, like the annual, okay.
Correct.
And I think part of that too is still budget discussion, right? So there may be a year where the capacity is only if we look at sort of what the impact to all of them might be, it might be the max is 1% in a year, right? Max might be 2%. It's really, that's kind of where the fiscal constraints come into play. And there may be, it may be, depending on the structure at the group, right? You might have ranges of, hey, they went super above and beyond, met some high level of expectation or did something else, and those might have sort of graduated ranges, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I just have one. Can I go?
Mr. President? Oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
just one other, is that okay?
Yep.
So I know I mentioned the stipend last night, and the administration did address that, but I was just wondering, so we would be phasing that out if stipends, or
I think we're trying to stop using stipends as sort of a Band-Aid measure. So I think when Lynn was talking about sort of the 40 hours, right? I think a lot of times what happens is you get into a one-off position where, you talk about the negotiation, right? Someone might come to the administration and say, hey, I'm doing this now. I didn't used to be doing this. And the solution might be, okay, we'll give you a stipend. Or the solution, I think previously also was, we'll increase you to 40 hours. Didn't necessarily mean like the time constraints of the job were different, but there was sort of additional responsibilities. And rather than addressing the grade and the classification of the position and the overall compensation, that the short-term solution was, okay, we'll increase the hours or we'll add a stipend. And I don't think that's a sustainable practice. I think realistically, now we have a tool to reevaluate, okay, has the job changed? Have the additional responsibilities shifted the work environment? And does that warrant a change in position? Or do we go revisit and also look at sort of the comparable salaries and make bigger adjustments?
thank you.
I could just add one thing on that point about the additional duties. So when we went through the JAQ, the criteria there was a lot of different criteria. So it isn't just about like, hey, you're going to process this piece of paper, now you're going to process these 3 pieces of paper, right? In order to change that grade, it's got to, somewhere in there has to be a change, whether it's just the discretion level, it can't just be an additional duty. There's got to be more to it to fit in that criteria that would increase the grade. So not just adding another duty that we say, all right, we'll give you a stipend for this. Like, in order to change the grade, it does need to do that. But I think to Mason's point, we don't want to Band-Aid it and throw a stipend or throw another 5 hours. Like, if these positions are truly changed, let's change them, make them work for us. Make, you know, that's what we want to do. Make sure the positions are meaningful and they're doing meaningful work.
Trustee Dolan? Yeah, good.
So my questions are for Lynn, I believe, or whoever. So you had stated something, and forgive me, it was a while ago, so you could have worded it differently, but you had said, you know, when you go back to Mason and say, oh, you know, I need 86 for, you know, you said you beg for money or whatever.
I do, yeah.
So you would, but before that, you had said a position, just because they have a master's degree, it only calls for a bachelor's degree. Just because they have 10 years of experience, they only need 2. So what's a determining factor and who determines it? So in other words, if someone comes in for a position that's 80, they only need a bachelor's degree and they only need 2 years experience, and it calls for an $80,000 salary. So if they want 85, is that discretionary? That you would make that decision in hiring somebody, even though the job doesn't call for the masters that they have?
So when we're talking about the ranges, right, that's the entry level on the bottom level of the range, right? So if you just had a bachelor's degree and 2 years experience, that's what it called for, then you'd be at the bottom. But that's not the people we're getting in. We're getting people that have between 5 and 10 years experience. They're not gonna be hired at the entry level. That is to set the classification plan and range, is what I'm talking about when we're looking at the minimum. That's not necessarily where someone would fall in it, and many of our employees fall elsewhere in it because they've been in the position or they have the experience. But to set when we're just looking at the classification plan, we have to set with the minimum, because that's what we hire into. But we obviously have a range to hire into. And it's not just myself, it's myself, the department head, budget and admin, and the mayor as well. We all have a discussion. What does this person bring to the table? Does it warrant, right? I mean, we have some people come in and they didn't have any experience and they're like, yeah, well, this is what I want. Well, you don't have the experience to get there. You don't have the knowledge to get there. Like, that's part of the interview process too, right? To kind of figure out, you know, where they should fall.
Okay, and then regarding the performance bonus, who makes that determination? Like, is it a department head that comes to you or the mayor and says, hey, Joe did a really great job, he did this, this, and this? And how is that determined, and who determines if it's approved and how much they get?
So, as Mason said, there will probably be, you know, whatever the pool of money is this year, and he'll tell us, right? This year, if there's any performance bonuses, they can only be up to 1%. We'd have to have a process in place, and that was part of what I was talking about with the working group. It wouldn't be a solo decision. It would have to be a group decision. So it would be, you know, the department head, myself, and probably the mayor that would have the discussion. But there shouldn't be really any surprises, because before they get into the evaluation, we're going to have expectation setting. So when people get to the performance evaluation, they should know where they stand. So if you had all these goals and you've been, you know, showing up to work and doing your job but not going above and beyond per what your, you know, statements were or your goals, I think it's going to be clear at that point. So there shouldn't be any surprise. But that is what the intent of the working group is to help build that system that'll work for everyone. And I say this all the time. I'm not saying we're going to get it right the first time, right? We're going to build something just like with this classification and compensation plan. We put it together. I think it's a good plan. But I'm not telling you it's perfect, and I'm not telling you that this is going to be the be-all and end-all, because I'll probably be standing in front of you asking for something else because it didn't work. And it's okay if it doesn't work. The same with the performance evaluations and the bonuses. If we get there and we're like, gosh, we thought this was going to be wonderful and it wasn't, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get back into that working group and figure out how to make it better the next year. And I think we would do that anyway, right? Evaluate it as we go on so we can make these tweaks along the way. Don't let it be and just say, well, this is what we did and we're going to. No, how can we make it better? What worked, what didn't? The department heads have to give feedback too, because again, some people are numbers people, some people are words people. So we need some balance that'll work for everyone. But what needs to happen is more communication between, department heads and employees. That's the critical thing. But there will always be a time in which we should revisit, and we will continue to revisit to make sure it works.
Okay, and my last question is, I believe you said there's 6 people that are moving from 40 hours to 35 hours? And at the same, when you said, I believe you said salary, so, or is it hourly? So are they losing 5 hours of pay? That's my question.
They are not. They will be going to 35 hours at the same pay.
Okay, so the same weekly, or however, the 2 weeks,
Yeah.
whatever.
Most of us are salaried, so the same, they will be on the same weekly pay.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Now, 1 second, and I'll get to you. So, a follow-up on that one is, so they're gonna go from 40 to 35. Is there gonna be like a different classification for the job description? And we, because even though they're not really getting a pay raise, so to speak, but are we adding in like another responsibility to them because it's coming in as, okay, they're gonna get a higher hourly rate because they're going from 40 hours to 35 hours?
So I can say, yeah, I have someone in my office in this situation. We did rewrite the job description to reflect that. I mean, I think we will evaluate the job descriptions for those people to make sure it does reflect. But again, no one's losing anything, right? So some of these people are at the top of their range anyway.
So I just want to follow up. So, my understanding of, there are, in addition to the 40-hour week employees, I think it's fair to say, and I don't know the exact number, there are some people whose present grade and step on the classification plan exceeds what the new salary range is. So everybody in this plan is being held harmless, so to speak, right? So if you're a 40-hour week employee right now, let's pretend for simplicity's sake, right? If you're a 40-hour week employee right now, and you make $99,000 a year, and you transition to a new grade and step with a band, the salary range for 35-hour week employee caps out at 87, you're still gonna make 99 for 35.
Correct. Yeah, and,
And I think that comports with what you said. I just want to be clear so that later on there isn't any confusion.
right, and I think, refresh my memory, some of these 40-hour people, we were given the option to come onto the new plan or not. Is my recollection correct?
Yeah, so actually, of the 40-hour employees it impacts, only one is not currently at top step in their current range. So if the plan is adopted as recommended by the council, we had, again, this is an implementation over the year, so depending on where their step date aligns, the recommendation was to offer either to stay at 40 hours until they reach their step date, get their next step increase, transition into the plan at what time they'll move to the 35, or immediately get the benefit of going to the 35 at their current salary. So kind of offering basically a decision there, so that we could kind of hold harmless either way. So I think one of the things, one of the questions about the reviews, I think the implementation period is really important in that this isn't all overnight, start January 5th, if that's what the council goes with. Like, that was what the recommendation was, because you need a strong date for sort of the cost implications, and depending on how you move the date, the costs change, the date that people fall into the plan changes, right? The effective dates all change based on steps and timing, so no matter what, it can shift the entire plan if you change the date. But in terms of the performance bonuses, because January 5th is really, if that's what's adopted, is the first day, the first time somebody could receive a bonus wouldn't be till the next January. So it gives us that time to build out this structure, make sure it's implemented properly, have those goal setting and expectation setting period, and make sure the exempt rules and regs are updated, have everything kind of in order to where when we really get into the plan kind of fully phased in after the first year, we've really kind of ironed it out, so.
I've said this before, this plan is based on, I've lived this plan my whole life. So, to me, it's normal, it makes a lot of sense. I remember a word, saying that was said to me many years, and I've repeated it many times, no profit, no sharing. So basically, and then that was able to allow some of the companies that I was at to not have a layoff, that they might not have, any profit sharing for that year. So I feel, I understand that, and like I said, I've lived that, I understand that, I personally get that. We are taking a group of employees that were hired under a different kind of set of rules, and now we're going to something a little bit different. So change is hard for everybody, but I do like the fact that there is flexibility. We can revisit this. There is no hard stop. So far from what I'm hearing is that there is, we're just not putting a hammer down. It's gonna be a case-by-case basis, and so I'm glad to be hearing that. And I just wanted to state that. Did you have?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of the change, right? It's hard. We know it's hard. We've heard it. Mason and I heard it. We do understand it. But at some point, you have to make it, right? And this is the tough part when you do this transition, which is why we're talking about the hold harmless, right? At some point, if you don't, we're gonna be talking about it in 5 years and 10 years, because there's another set of employees who don't wanna change. So we're trying to make it as less impactful to people as possible. But yes, we are gonna have to make a change. Everyone does. We have to evolve. The city has to evolve. The city needs this foundation to go forward. I mean, we spent a lot of time and money putting this plan together. Again, I'm not saying it's perfect, but we do need the change. I really do believe in order to change the culture, we have to start somewhere. And at any point in time, if people feel any way, they're always welcome to come and discuss it, and we can work through it together. You know, we may not all get the result we want, but there's no way in which, or no time in which that we can't have the discussion and see if there isn't something that we can do. But yes, change is hard, but at some point, you gotta rip the Band-Aid off, and, you know, it kind of felt like it was now, or at some time, hopefully in the near future, to get us to that good, solid foundation that we can build upon going forward.
Council Folwell, and then,
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. I don't think they go to the heart of the matter. When you discussed the lab techs, you said they're in different costs now. Do they know why?
Yes,
They're absolutely clear. You have supervisory duties, you don't.
yes. The one that is not in the same class called me, and we had a conversation and explanation about the JAQs. Same thing like I did here. That's what I do to explain to them. So yes, and that person's supervisor, the superintendent of water, was also informed, so it was kind of a trial conversation of how they ended up there.
So they know because they asked, but there's no other systematic way for people to understand why they're in the pot of work that they're in.
So the department heads were all, we sat with each of them individually, explained their departments. And then if any, they were to take that back to their departments. And if there were further questions, which we did, we had some people come to visit Mason and I, and we sat with them and had, that if they had questions, we explained it. So yes, I mean, I'm not telling you everyone came to see me. I'm not telling you everyone wants to talk about it, but the people that did have questions that they didn't feel the department head had explained well enough did come to see Mason and I during the time that, you know, and we had the discussions.
If I may continue. I'm concerned that the elimination of part-time employees is going to fall primarily on women. Is that true? Have you looked at that?
We're not eliminating the part-time employees. We're just removing, taking them out of the class plan. We're not removing them. We're putting them, so right now, we don't have a place where part-time employees live. So part of the memo that I sent down did have a listing of part-time employees. So we're not eliminating them. What we're saying is those positions need to be evaluated every year during budget time. So when Mason sits down with the department heads, you know, to discuss budget, or whoever in the department, what's your need for this part-time position? What's changed? What hasn't? Is your need increased? Is it decreased? Those are the discussions that we're not having right now, whether or not we need these part-time positions. So they're not being eliminated. There were a couple at the COA that did based on budget. They didn't have the budget for some of the positions. So at the beginning of this fiscal year, one or two, but it was based on budget for those positions.
No job security.
I don't know that part-timers, I don't have any job security. I'm an at-will employee,
Yes, okay.
right?
But somebody who works part-time at the library and has the last 5 years, what expectations can they have of that?
Right, so the library's a little bit different because they're part of the union. So their security is a little bit different. So really, the only places that are part-time employees is COA, and we have one at City Hall.
Yeah, so I mean, mostly we have seasonal and ordinance is silent on part-time employees that aren't seasonal or per diem. The language is.
I can't remember right now.
Another bucket of employees that don't really wear, and some are on the class haven't been on the class plan, trying to address that. And to be honest with you, when we sat in conversations, it's very clear with departments that there were certain positions that weren't evaluated, right? And there's also places where maybe there's such an increase in duties on part-time that we need a full-time. And without sort of having to process, it kind of gets lost.
So my concern is not a concern, you've addressed it. I only had one other question, and it had to do with you're getting and somebody else getting a step increase this year and then rolling into the compensation plan next year.
So the 35 people that are rolling in will roll, it'll just be whenever their anniversary date is or their step date, right? So my anniversary happens to be in May, so that's up until I'll get my step increase in May on the current plan, and that's my date for the entry into the new plan.
Why aren't you going to be in the new plan starting on your anniversary date?
I will be.
Well, why? Why are you getting an increase in your old plan on your next anniversary date?
Part of that.
Is there some better way I can frame it?
No, I understand the question. So part of the reason is again, we're really trying to make it a hold harmless as much as possible. There are currently those 21 positions that we talked about. Those are, when I say positions, that's actually when I'm talking about employees. Because they're below the range, the goal is to immediately address that as soon as the plan's implemented. There's also other employees that they have an anniversary date. They have some expectation of a 3% step increase in the next year. And by kind of maintaining that effective day, that 1 year anniversary from their last, we're sort of holding them harmless for that 3% and kind of phasing in the transition from 3% to 2% over time. And then additionally, we have employees that are currently at top step on the existing plan, and under the new ranges, they now have room for growth. And I believe it was 13 of them. 12 of them, because they didn't get their last step increase in the past year, could have been 10 years ago. Some of them have been here a very long time. Because they haven't had a step increase in the last year, now they have a new sort of anniversary effective date when they get that 2% on January 5th. So it kind of resets everyone on a new anniversary date. And again, the reason for the phased in kind of over the next year is so that we hold those settled expectations of 3% increases for those relevant employees, basically holding them harmless.
Lastly.
I gotta get to Sawyer, unless that was just a quick follow-up question, because I really need to. All right, can we just, I want to get to Council Sawyer, and then I'll go back.
Well, so you were talking about no stipends for additional work or whatever. I was wondering if there's any consideration for certain jobs that have more hours and more duties at certain time of a year or certain years, such as the election office, like now where they have so much going on with the early voting and the election that's happening. Is there a different kind of consideration for those types of positions?
I don't know that that's been, elections are the tough ones across every municipality, right? Because it's seasonal, right? It's tough for a period of time, but the rest of the time it's not, and that's always been discussed. Right now, that position is undercompensated, and we need to bring it up. I think that solves some things for the position, but as, voting changes, I mean, I think, we have to talk about it. We do want to get away from stipends, though. That's definitely something we want to move away from. So there's only one person in that office that is part of this group. The other people in that office are clerical staff, so they would be entitled to overtime. But, that position traditionally has been something that is tough. Because right now, I mean, they're there all the time. They're there on weekends, early voting, and early voting has been, very busy for them. So I don't know the perfect answer to the election, and I'm not sure any community has solved it well. But I think that position is one of the undercompensating one, and I know bringing that position up will give that position a lot of relief.
I think that's part of the solution.
Right.
Making sure the position itself receives
Right, thank you.
Council Waterman?
Well, my question was going to be the very same question, because I definitely agree with you that that is an undercompensated position. And it has levels of stress that are quite high at different times, and I think we're in one of those times, or about to be. So I'm really glad to hear that the city is taking that into consideration. All I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Councilor, you had another question?
I do, and it may be that I'm just completely ignorant about the city and how compensation works. I was looking at this, who would not be entitled to a periodic pay increase? And it says here that anybody who is sick for more than 6 weeks, 30 workdays, would not be entitled to a pay increase. Is that right?
Somewhat. So what we would say is they wouldn't be entitled at that time, right? So if once they cut that back at work and they've worked during that period of time to make up that full year, then they would be.
What do you mean?
So say someone works January to July and then they're out for a period of time, but then they come back, right? And they were out for 30 days. Their anniversary date would get pushed by 30 days. Pay, is that what, I don't know what's in there. If they're out and they're being paid, it wouldn't apply.
Somebody's out on medical leave, paid medical leave for 30 days.
No.
30 days doesn't
Right.
count.
But if they get cancer and they are out for 4 months or 6 months, then they're being adversely,
It depends on the sick time, right? So if
Yes.
still in a paid, so I was just saying, if you're in a paid
Trying to understand it, I don't know
That's
what
my
it means.
does sick leave accumulate year after year?
Yes.
So if you've been here for a long time, then you are,
There is a maximum carryover, so up to a certain maximum. And that is how the ordinance is written today as well, if people are out on unpaid leave. Because we do have generous sick and vacation time, generally, most people don't go into a no-pay status. It's rare. Does it happen? Yes, but we also have sick banks as well that people belong to, that they can borrow time from, if some of that happens. But if they're not here to work, you know, if they're out on the no pay status, that's when they come back, you move it forward. And that's currently how it's written as well and how the
currently be
practice.
eligible for a step after 12 months in a pay status. Unusual, but if somebody's time is sort of somebody.
it's really unusual? It's really unusual? People aren't getting cancer and,
Yeah.
Sometimes it happens where they're out on FMLA and they're on sick leave, right? They're still in a pay status.
okay,
They're still in a pay status.
okay.
President Delacio?
Thank you. So first of all, just a comment, if I may. I love the fact that you talked about, you know, this isn't set in stone, as our good friend Mark Cooper used to always say. They call it the revised ordinances of the city of Attleboro for a reason. So I do appreciate that. I also appreciated, Lynn, you saying, you know, people can come and talk to you and talk through things. My question goes to 13-3.5, appeal of classifications. It talks about the Human Resources Board. Can you talk to us a little bit about the status of the Human Resources Board? Because if it's in there for the appeal, is that the old Personnel Board? Is that coming back? What do we,
I'll be honest, I don't have any contact with the personnel board. My understanding, or that doesn't exist as far as I know right now. You know, someone in my office who's been there longer said they couldn't get people to serve on it. It just didn't work in the past. So I don't know if there's any interest in that. I don't know if we'd want to bring it back. You know, keep in mind, there are certain issues that a HR board, a personnel board would be able to hear, but my office deals with a lot of sensitive information too that really can't be shared. I mean, obviously, if someone's challenging a class, that's a little bit different, but there's a lot of things that I think people think when they're on that board that they want to be part of, in the know, in my office, information from my office. And we just can't. So I don't know. I don't know what that would look like. I mean,
I was just curious where it's in there, and also, it's no indictment on your office. I've dealt with them.
I'm not taking it that way
They
at
do
all.
a fantastic job, you know.
Thank
The last, I guess, statement I'd say is there's a lot of comparisons between the private sector and the public sector, and I think when we're looking at the private sector, a lot of those are sales, you know, revenue through sales, where this is revenues from rate users and taxpayers. So I think there's just caution to be had there, but I appreciate this today because I'm a lot closer here, sitting here to, you know, it's probably 85% when I walked in, I'm probably about 98.5%. So I'll have some questions to get me all the way there, but I do appreciate that. The question I have regarding stipends is and I'm just thinking, there's a couple different department heads that have different stipends for different things. I'm thinking specifically, recently, the building inspector, and I could be wrong, is also the facilities manager and is getting a stipend for that. So,
Yeah, that's.
Not a stipend.
Okay.
So that position was reclassified. I believe the building inspector used to be a grade 11. It is now, it was changed to a grade 12 to comprehend the facilities manager, and that's the position that was evaluated here.
Okay.
So I don't believe there's any stipend. Again, that was a case where, if anything, I think the approach was probably more what we're looking for here, in that it was a reevaluation of the position, the responsibilities, you know, what the actual duties and day-to-day work environment are, and ultimately there was a grade change, and then that's reflected in this study.
appreciate the clarification, thank you.
All right, I'm gonna grab I'm gonna try to go for another 15 minutes, a few more questions. But just so that we're not overloading everything and trying to get all the information in, what I'm gonna wanna do is, I'm gonna email you, some of the questions, and so that you'll have a little bit extra time to kind of go over it, maybe share it back with the council and stuff. And then, maybe we can get back on, I think we're thinking on like November 12th, and have you come on down and maybe just give a little bit more clarification, and,
I'm gonna, depending on how quickly you get the questions, I'm out at the end of.
yeah, it'll be to you, tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah,
Then I
yeah.
could do that. I'm out at the
Yeah.
end, Wednesday,
Yeah.
Thursday, Friday next week, so you know.
It is the goal of this council to try to get this all done by the end of the year. We are pushing hard to try to get this done. We understand the importance of it, and we want to get this taken care of.
And please know if other people have questions, you want to have further conversations other than Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week, but please feel free to reach out.
Yeah.
You know, I'm happy to talk, to chat, to clarify anything that I can.
Yeah. I know, all right, there was one of the questions I wanted to clarify on per diem. After 15 days, per diem means every day. Is there say if for an acting mayor position? This is one of the questions that was sent. Is there an acting mayor for 7 days, including weekend days? Is it each day paid in the per diem calculation? And that might be.
I don't want to get too deep on the elected in my role, just because
Okay, yeah.
I don't think it's in my
Yeah.
purview. I think that's open to interpretation, and maybe you all, you know, there can be
Okay.
further conversation. But in my role,
Yeah.
I don't really want to dictate any of the elected.
Yeah, all
piece.
right. I'll have that in there, the questionnaire, and and maybe if you,
So my understanding, I believe that's salary, but in terms of the structure, exact same. I'm wrong, I apologize.
yeah, no, it was one of the many questions that we got from, I don't even know where that question came from. I know it's on the list that we were all sending in and getting it all grouped together and everything. And,
Today, and it is exactly the same.
and I apologize if this has already been asked. I know you touched a little bit on 20 hours. Are you trying to get away from 20-hour employees? Part-time employees, part-time employees?
So part-time would be, in my opinion, it's 19 hours or less. 20 hours makes them benefit eligible. We don't really have any right now. I mean, there's one right now, but in general, the part-timers are 19 hours or less.
Yeah, now, one of that, would that be is that in your office? Is that in the auditor's office? Okay. All right, which is a very important position. Now, is that, are we looking to have that go full-time, or we're looking to continue on to have that at 20 hours?
Trying to hire an assistant city auditor. The job has been posted. We've done multiple offers. It was out there last spring, it's out there now.
So there's no, there is no issue on, like, that position is gonna be ending or something or other, because we wanna get rid of, you know,
Plan that I had sent to the council almost 2 years ago, was that position that's presently part-time in my office to be part-time through June of 2020. What year is this? 2020.
so through
So
next,
next, at
yeah.
the end of this year.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's gonna happen with that position. To be fair to the process, right, like, that in and of itself isn't really, like, specific. If I have concerns about what I can and can't get done with the staffing in my office, I'll go to the administration and the council.
Counselor Reynolds.
I'd just like to jump on that too, because I was going to ask that question myself about, and it concerns Deb's office, basically. Because I know, we're trying to kind of slow down the process of part-timers. But in this case, where you have a part-timer that we're not even sure if she would come back in 2025 if you needed her. But I would hope so, because there would be nothing to help move that office along, because she's been there so long. So I'm thinking, based on what you're saying here, is that would be something that would be considered.
Yeah, and-
Because obviously it makes sense at this moment in time.
I can speak to that, because I've already confirmed with the auditor that that position remains in place to the end of the fiscal year, and then we'll have the conversation, and I have told the auditor directly more than once, I would never let that office fail.
Great, thank
That's
you.
not in the administration's interest, it's not in anybody's interest, so, auditor, you'll confirm we've had that conversation, I've made a
That's what he
commitment.
said.
Yeah.
I've made a commitment, I'm not gonna let that office fail, I really want Deb to get a number two, because
Yeah, we love her
she
to
needs
get
a number
somebody.
two, but
The
not gonna let her
plan
fail.
prior to all of this, right, the plan was that employee approached me and said, my plan is to transition to part-time. And that part-time position was only gonna be through this, June 30th, 2025. Unfortunately, like, backfilling that position, that will be the full-time assistant city auditor position, has proven to be a challenge. And as every day goes by, it's one less day that there'll be somebody in the office to help. So I'll address that differently, right?
So for the
But
record,
everybody feels comfortable that would,
yeah, and we're
But
not
my
trying to
question
get
too-
rid of that position. What we don't want to get in the habit of doing is having part-time benefited employees. That's not in the best interest of the city.
Understood.
But I would never let the accounting department fail. Deb has my word, not only as the mayor, but as an individual, that I will not let that happen.
And also, just to be clear, we're not trying to phase out part-time positions. We want to just evaluate them to see if they're needed.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
I
so I don't want to
understand.
say we're just, we're getting rid of them. I just don't want that to be lost. Like,
what
we're
was the
evaluating,
purpose? Yeah. I think-
evaluating on a yearly basis to ensure what's needed.
Understood.
Okay.
I do have another question.
Yes.
If, I know you're going to send these, I know you're going to get this long list of questions, but there was on page 14 of the plan that we got, I had a question about market rate. What exactly does that mean, market rate? Like, what's the definition of market rate for those, how's that determined? What is the,
The easiest one is lifeguards, right? So what are the other municipalities paying, right? If we're struggling to get lifeguards, if we're paying $15 and, Norton's paying 17. So it's going out and figuring out what are other people paying, what's out there in the open labor market, keeping in mind what minimum wage is. In some of these positions, especially the, like the lifeguard positions, some of them, they get a little more if they come back, right? So those seasonal positions. But going out and seeing what's out there in the market and what they're paying. So, we go on and do Google searches, or I'll have someone in my office call around to other municipalities and say, hey, what are you guys paying? Or you can go on, some of them have it on the website. So we go out and look to make sure we're being competitive with people around us.
We have to pay to fulfill our needs. Most simple way of saying it, basic economics.
yeah, okay, understood, thank you.
Yeah, all right.
I have-
All right, well, so I'm going to get you the rest of the questions. I think you've all have done a fantastic job of answering very thoroughly, and I really appreciate it. So I'm going to get you these questions, and a lot of them are going to be answered, and you might just put in a quick, all right, answer that, or just to reiterate what it is. And if you think you want to add something in there. if it gets to the point where we get enough questions answered and we feel that we're comfortable and we have enough taken care of, and then we don't have to bring it back, we won't. And we'll try to get this done. But I'll reiterate, it is our,
Wrong intention.
strong intentions of getting this all done by the end of the year. I mean, assuming, obviously, it has to pass the full council, and, and we don't know how that's gonna go.
But I do wonder if we should take it out, because then there can be a full discussion of the full council. We're not doing that. This is the first time we've actually had an opportunity to even discuss it. So quite frankly, as a member of your committee, I don't know why we're not taking it out. I mean, so that we can have a full council discussion on it. That's my thought. I think we should take it out tonight and then start discussing it, get the answers to the questions and move it along.
President Delacio, if we
So
would.
if we take it out, that means it's out of committee, so that essentially ends the discussion. This way here, the way Councilor Angelo's doing it, is it gives us the opportunity to get the deck that was presented tonight, continue to get some of the answers to the questions we have. I think something that's this complex, I don't think there's.
So with that said, then, what's the thought process? I mean, so are we going to bring it out at the next committee meeting, which is mid-November?
Would be November 12th.
Yeah, so is that when we're, because, you're talking December, which is what they're talking about January, so we want to take it out. We can't be clowning around with it. The deal is that the prices would change, the figures would change. So if we're going to do it, you're not going to bring it out tonight, then I think we should bring it out the 12th.
So if we bring it on the 12th, then we have the 19th to, handle it as a council.
Move.
And then we can get it all taken care of on, out of committee, like get everything out of committee on the 12th.
We should have plenty of time to discuss it again.
Yeah, and that would give us time. If we
That
did
gives
on
you
the
time,
12th,
and
yeah.
you're going to get it done.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean,
President.
you're the chair, that's
Yeah.
totally up to you.
Mhm.
I think we have plenty of time
Yeah.
between now and December to get questions. I don't want to see this rushed through.
Mhm.
Not saying that's what you're
I don't think we're
insinuating.
rushing it. I don't think we're rushing it. We've had it for a while.
We
We
just had
went
the
through
public
city council.
hearing last night. This is
I
the
just
first
think
committee meeting.
this has been, and I have looked this over, it has been in our hands for a long time. And I would question how many people have actually read it. And this is the first time we've had an opportunity to even discuss it. So I clearly think that it's time, and that we know enough, we've gotten enough, we've got the questions, they're going in. Lynn has said she's going to get them back to us. We know Mason is leaving. I think that it's a plan that we've had a lot of discussion over, and I feel comfortable that it's a moving project, that we can always keep going forward. And everyone knows I won't be quiet if we don't like it.
Yeah, so, one second. Just so I get your understanding, and Council Tavares too as well, chime in. So are you saying that you're okay if we pull it all out on the 12th? Get the questions answered and then have it pulled out all on the 12th?
And pull it out on the 12th.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
I would do it tonight if it were me,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's not me. So I said, but do it by the 12th, so we have it done by the end of November,
Yeah.
early
Yeah.
December,
Yeah.
so we don't have to worry about it.
Council Tavares?
So since, I don't know if it would be appropriate to ask, since we have members here from the administration, just from a timing standpoint, if, assuming we pass this as a council, is there any reason for creating any runway for how much time between when we pass this and January? So in other words, does it matter whether we take it out of committee and vote it out in council in November versus whether we end up doing that and voting it out as a full council, say at the end of December?
Yes,
Make any difference?
of course it will.
Okay.
If you change, then it's good to go. But depending what plates you start spinning, then that's gonna require some other reworkings, not only of numbers, but of other decisions. So yes, I would respectfully suggest that it matters the degree to which you change or alter the proposal.
So for purposes of just assuming there's no changes, would you see that creating an issue for the administration? That end?
There will be some friendly amendments to this as well, which I have to make sure I dot my i's and cross my t's. And many times, dotting my Ts and crossing my Is, so. Council Fuller?
I just would like an opportunity to talk about the compensation plan for publicly elected officials. We have a special meeting. But
Council Angel.
Don't do it. Call me.
Councilor Holmes?
Thank you. So I just want to be clear. So when you say no change, you mean not adopted? Or do you mean no changes and adopted? Because you just said, well, if there's any changes, if it's at the end of December, but you're saying if we make the changes to what you're proposing, or are you saying no changes meaning not adopted?
No, I meant adopted as is
Okay.
versus the nature and degree of the changes you may decide to make.
If I may,
Yes.
depending on the implementation date, where people fall, their effective dates when they come into the plan, their salaries, sort of the implementation process for payroll and things like that. That's sort of, I've essentially mapped that out into the current structure. Whatever changes there are, it needs to be remapped, right? So any minor change, like again, it's in your purview, it's obviously in your purview, but any of those changes we'd have to rework, or if it's a back and forth conversation, if you have questions related to how does this change the overall impacts, like that's going to take time. So that's where I think we say there's sort of administrative tasks that would have to happen. I think a few weeks at a minimum is really needed between the vote and implementation.
See, one second, say, Gould?
I'm sorry.
No, say, go ahead.
But there's a date of implementation, right? So if the council, under their purview, chose, you know what, we don't want to implement it on January 5th. We want to do it January 15th. That changes the date. If their date that they voted, it said effective January 5th, and we didn't have the runway to administratively implement it, we would do the same thing with anything else, right? Retros, right? Like we would.
Which creates a lot of other
It does create
challenges, but it's
right. But I'm just right. They have the. It's within their purview, right, to do what the council can vote. Is it easier if it was voted the way you already mapped it? Of course, right? But they have the option to amend certain things if they so choose, and our obligation as the people who work there are, I think, obligated to tell them this is the consequence of that change, and this is how much longer it's going to take us to get there. But it's technically, right, if everything as proposed to you was adopted as is, and Mason has mapped all of that, payroll would have to be updated. Maybe salary tables might have to be updated. I believe it's fair to say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I've never seen the schedule, you've mapped every single individual.
correct.
Right? So there's already an existing schedule that says this is where the person holding, let's use me, the city auditor, you've already mapped that. So if the plan went in as presented, they, and HR, and consequently as a function of payroll, right? That's already mapped someplace so that they would have to update tables to put that particular position on a new plan so it would fall through to payroll. And payroll for exempt employees, for your knowledge, is processed weekly, right? So your office generates payroll 1 week, that payroll is compiled, and it's paid pretty much in the same week, to be perfectly honest with you. The generation is on a Wednesday, they finalize it on a Monday, it's uploaded. So it's a lift for people to do it. Whatever change you make would have to be considered mapped. To Mason's point, he's not going to be here in the building, right? He's going to be away. So part of the implementation process is your vote, the timeline for it, and the implementation date that you put in it. It's consistent with what the presentation that was given to you. It would mean one thing if it's a different thing, right? So it's January 5th, right, Mason? Yes.
That was the recommended,
Right, the
first
recommended
full pay
date,
period in
right.
January.
It's the week before it's Christmas, right? The payroll week. It's already, like, you know what I mean? So if for some reason administratively it couldn't be done by then, and you said that January 5th, it might require adjustments to somebody's individual check. Is that fair?
Council Holmes? Oh, all right, I'm sorry.
No, it's just a follow-up. And the only reason I asked the question was in the spirit of full collaboration, really, between the council and the administration. So I appreciate those answers, and I think that hopefully that's helpful for other councilors. That's helpful for me, so appreciate that.
Last question, Council Holmes?
Thank you. I agree with Councilor Reynolds that we should probably try to act on this sooner. That concludes my comments.
Diane.
All right, okay, sure, go ahead.
So if you, Mason, have it all mapped out for every person and you're leaving, what happens? Who fixes all the changes we make, if any?
Well, so that's kind of where I was going, right? So if there's substantive changes, right, it's also fair for you to get the feedback.
I will do my best to provide that as early as I can. So if there are things that you would need, you have questions on, and you need feedback, and what those changes are, I will do my best to provide those. In terms of if something was adopted as is, HR is really the place that, HR and the Treasurer's Office of Payroll are really the place where sort of implementing the changes in our accounting system that they're kind of the kind of main folks doing that. So, but again, changes, substantive, if there's questions, like I want to, that's why I'm asking for, like, you know, hopefully you guys can make some of those recommendations if there's changes soon, so I can provide you feedback. I think it's fair to the process that you know the financial implications of any small changes or movements, because that is a factor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you all set? Yes. Yeah, all right, well, thanks. Appreciate you guys coming down. I want to say one more thing before everybody gets out of here. We had a counselor that had a brand-new baby, just a shout-out to Counselor Lavoy. He's got a healthy brand-new baby. His wife is doing great as well, and just wanted to say congratulations to the Lavoy family and everybody involved.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you guys for coming, appreciate everything, and I think this helps us a lot, and I'm very happy with how this went, and appreciate everybody's great questions, because we had a lot, and you guys did a great job with us, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Gotta entertain a motion.
Thank you.
All right, and I want to take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned at 7:36.
Could you email me?